Serious, murder attempt survivors of Reddit. Who has had an attempted murder upon them? How did you survive? Then husband and I were arguing, sitting side by side on the couch. Suddenly, he grabbed me by the throat. I struggled to pry him off of me and fell off the couch. He then straddled me and continued choking me. I tried to get leverage, but he was 80 plus lbs heavier and 5 inches taller and I couldn't get purchase. I remember blacking out and feeling so this is it, I guess. Not quite peace but not fear. Came to gagging and coughing. Apparently me passing out scared him. He never apologized. The marks took ages to fade. And yes, I left him later. My brother, 6, and I, 9, were playing games in our computer room, which was at the back of our house, when our next door neighbor, 20-ish male, came over and said he needed us to go to his place for something. We sort of knew him. Our dad had hired him to do some work, and so he wasn't a total stranger to us, so we went. He took us into his bedroom, bound our hands and tried to stuff socks into our mouths to gag us. He pulled out a knife and tried to threaten us. We didn't understand the weight of the situation even then, because he asked me, "Do you know what this means?" and I joked, "You're going to cook something in the kitchen." He then grabbed me and pulled me onto the floor and tried to smother me. When he realized I was still getting some breaths in, he switched to strangling me. I remember kind of giving in and telling myself it's okay. Mum and dad are going to give me a good funeral, and then saw my brother standing at the door saying he was scared and he wanted to leave. I begged him to stay and he did, which is something I will never forget and has made such a hugely positive impact on our relationship. At that point it clicked in my mind that once I was dead he was going to kill my brother too. So I started to fight the hardest I had ever fought. I bit and scratched and threw my body around and knocked a large stereo down that made enough noise for his parents to come in. They were home the entire time. They untied us, took us home, and his dad dropped to his knees and begged my mum not to call the police. Obviously she completely ignored his request and called. In the end they found carving knives, industrial plastic bags and other equipment to dispose of our bodies in his room. To this day that is the closest I have ever come to dying. Jesus. Personally I find this one of the worst ones on here. I guess because it's so close to home and easy to imagine happening. I'm glad you guys were okay. That must have been terrifying. Your instincts kicked in hard there. An ex beat me nearly to death and stabbed me twice. I remember the point where I let myself pass out because I thought I wasn't going to survive. It was the coldest day that year in the province, and the middle of the night. A jogger found me in the middle of the park, blood everywhere. He thought I was dead at first. 3 days in a coma, hypothermia, a list of injuries that are so horrific I don't like thinking about. If he hadn't had insomnia and went running at 3 AM I would have died. The jogger ended up becoming a big part of my life. I see him for a nice dinner twice a year. My parents paid off his student loans. I regularly send gifts to the trauma team that took care of me. That's really nice of your parents to pay off his loans and that you keep in touch and get dinner occasionally. My dad's girlfriend always hated me. She would constantly talk about putting me in foster care and would treat me very differently to how she treated her own kids. This happened when I was around 5 or 6. I woke up one night incredibly overheated and finding it really difficult to breathe. I was choking on the majority of my quite long and thick hair and had been covered up in several layers of thick blankets. My body, not my fave. I looked up and I remember her just standing there in the semi-dark room, watching me struggle with no expression on her face. As I started to struggle a little more I woke up her son, who was sleeping on the floor in the same room. Suddenly she changed and started to pull the hair out of my mouth and helped me to sit up. She got me a glass of water and told me I was lucky she came in because a ghost had shoved my hair down my throat and she was saving me. My dad took me to a doctor the next day for an asthma attack and I was given an inhaler for the next week. The fricked up thing is, because I was so young I didn't really put together what happened until I was much older. She never tried again, but she was horribly abusive. I cut all contact with her around age 13 and with my father at 19. Some people are just pure freaking evil. My mother tried pretty dang hard when she was alive. Worst thing was that was 4 of us in all but I was the only one she hated because I looked like dad. Pills, pushing me out a window, from a boat, leaving the house with everyone else at night with the front door open and me alone. This was a very bad area. She tried constantly to kick me from home. This carried on from the age of 5 till I was 8, and she successfully managed to kill herself instead. Ended up going to dad, who she kicked out of the house years beforehand, and after some pretty heavy therapy ended up pretty normal. Considering how my siblings turned out, I'm the lucky one. Gotta admit though, it never went in my head I might die. I just accepted it. Kinda hopped for it, no matter what she did. At night when she was crying alone in the front room, I was the only one who went to comfort her. Looking back, I'm glad I at least tried, but dang, I don't care what her problems were. I hate that woman to this day. My stepmother's my real mother as far as I'm concerned. In high school, my cousin and I were at the public pool. We were swimming in the deep end and just chatting. We'd never really been close, and we used to hate each other in middle school. But we'd kinda made amends and I was trying to be friendly. He tells me to swim towards the deep end and I do. I have never been a strong swimmer. He follows me and puts his hand on my shoulder. I thought he was just letting me know he wouldn't let me go under the water. Suddenly he grabs me, puts me in a full Nelson and dunks me underwater. I wasn't expecting this and I took in a lungful of water. He holds my there for a while and eventually brings me back up, lets me cough, then puts me back under. He does this a few times and every time he brings me up, I don't have time to cough out the water to breathe. I thought I was going to die. It was fairly late in the day, so there wasn't a lot of people around to witness this. Luckily my sister happened to walk by and called out for me. My cousin lets me go and I pathetically doggy paddle to the side. My sister sees that I'm having trouble breathing and pulls me out of the water. I looked back at my cousin and he didn't even look mad or anything. He just looked at me and watched me leave. I still see him every now and then at family reunions and such. I've never talked to him since. Everyone in the family loves him and the only person who knows what he tried to do to me is my sister. The family needs to know about this. I'll keep it short. Hanging out at my favorite bar around age 19. Saw an old friend's band play. I was hanging with another friend, Kevin, earlier. Kev is a big burly hockey player, so I hadn't been hit on by other dudes all night. But Kev had to leave to work the next day, so I was all alone near the night's end, waiting for my tab alone at the end of the bar, and an old man in a weird hat comes up to me. I'd seen him staring before during the show. "Hey sweetie, your boyfriend in the band?" "Yep, you are totally. I'm dating the drummer." "Why?" "Go me." "Good lie. I'm gonna fight him for ya." He kept on with that train of thought. It took a little convincing to get the guy not to fight my not boyfriend. After a minute, he gets extremely irate, growls, and stomps straight out of the bar. Weird, right? Turns out he'd roofied my drink an hour prior when I was hanging with Kevin, but Kevin and I swapped beers somehow. Kev nearly crashed his car on the way home, had to be driven the rest of the way as he got woozy, threw up in his yard before passing out in his own vomit, and his roommates had to carry him in and shower him before bed. He was unconscious but alive for the next 16 hours. Through 8 hours of his alarm clock beeping and through his whole work shift. He'd had just that one beer. The man was checking to see if the drugs kicked in, and realized he'd wasted them when I was still alert enough to argue. If I, at 120 pounds, had gotten that beer, instead of 260 pounds Kevin, I know I would have been a pretty corpse that night. I got in a fight outside of a club in Charlotte, NC one time. The guy went at my neck. I thought it was a punch, so I put my hand up to block it. He had a knife. I didn't know. I didn't feel anything at the time, but when he hit my hand he took off running. I chased him for about 3-5 seconds before I realized my hand looked like I was wearing a red glove, covered in blood. Good thing is where he hit me was below my thumb, in a fatty tissue area, so no serious damage at all. It just bled a lot. Nothing life-altering about it. Imagine how hardcore it would have looked as you still chased him down with a handful of blood. When I was about 12, I was swimming in a lake at our cottage. Another family was renting the cottage next to ours for the summer. A younger, but bigger, girl was part of that family. She joined me in swimming and kept pushing me under the water. At first I thought she was just messing around, but she started holding me under for longer and longer, even though between gasping, watery coughs, I was begging her to stop. I remember feeling helpless and like there was nothing I could do. She was stronger than me and I couldn't get away. My throat and eyes and nose were stinging. It was horrible. For whatever reason, she stopped and I ran to shore, crying the whole way, hoping I was faster than her and never looking back to see if she was gaining on me. When I told my mom what happened, she assured me the younger girl was just trying to play. No one ever legitimized how terrifying that experience was. This is a really long story, but I'll try to keep it short. This was about 4 years ago and I had just left my very abusive ex via being chased out of the house with a shotgun. He stole my car and I was running down the street calling a friend of mine to come rescue me. I'm running down my street. Come get me. Now I'm scared for my life at this point, and the next thing I know I hear the tires screeching of a car. My car. And I'm going over the car. I was going in and out of consciousness and my ex and one of his buddies steps out. My ex has a tire iron and his buddy has a steel bat. They started beating me ruthlessly as I laid there in the middle of the street, completely unable to do anything but attempt to cover my face. I vaguely remember the neighbors coming outside and tackling both of them while another called 911. I couldn't breathe by this point and I was begging over and over again in my head for them to please just end me. I couldn't take the pain anymore. I woke up in the hospital after 6 days of being in a coma and was asked to give a report shortly afterwards. I really don't remember a whole lot of that experience aside from getting the absolute crap beat out of me and wanting so desperately to just die. I don't exactly remember the point where I knew I was a goner, but it was probably about the time I saw them both step out with a bat and a tire iron. TLDR. I got the crap beat out of me with a bat and a tire iron about 4 years ago and I somehow managed to remain conscious enough for the neighbors to come to my rescue. I woke up in the hospital 6 days later. I am a survivor of kidnapping, brutal assault and rape. The first time I regained consciousness I accepted that I was going to die because of the immense pain and fear. I begged for days on end to be killed. Eventually my captors became fearful of the investigation and I was released in public. Naked and drugged, I spent the next few years in a heavily medicated blur wishing I had been dead. My recovery has mentally and emotionally been brutal, and even 16 years later I still suffer every single day, but I am finally so thankful to be alive. I'm thankful you are alive as well. While this wasn't technically an attempt on my life, I did accept my death as a kid. My mom had a prescription pill problem. She took a lot of morphine, soma, etc. Lots of opiates and muscle relaxers. She was super fricked up pretty much all the time, but that didn't stop her from insisting on driving me around. She would pick me up in a stupor and drive extremely recklessly. One moment that stands out in my memory is when she was driving 90 miles per hour down the freeway, heading straight for totally stopped traffic. And when she was just meters away she would slam on her brakes as hard as she could and skid to a stop behind the car in front of her. I was so petrified and felt so powerless in the car. So I just told myself that if I was going to die, it would be easier if I didn't have to see it coming and would just close my eyes and try to relax. I was around 7 years old, had a serious fear of cars for a long time after I finally didn't have to be at her mercy. Sorry, your mom's a C. A girl tried to gut me because I stopped letting pizzas get delivered to a local shithole of a community. The TLDR is that people kept getting mugged, assaulted, and I quickly became the only person with enough stupidity to keep delivering there. Eventually one of the people held me at gunpoint so he could get a free pizza, and I decided that it wasn't worthwhile to keep them in our delivery range even though a good chunk of our orders came from there. A few days later the big boss of that ghetto called our shop and told us that we were stupid and that we should keep our eyes peeled for his boys. I told him to get fricked and told him to expect a visit from the police. Anyway, the dude gets arrested for threatening harm and a bunch of other crap like drugs. As a bit of background, there are 2 housing authorities, like a bunch of government subsidized cookie cutter apartments, in my town. One on each side and both of them have gang ties and they both hate each other. I just a white boy who needed a cheap place to live, so I was out of place and they thought I was keeping pizza from them due to gang reasons. Anyway, a girl knocks at my door and tells me that she bought some wine but forget to buy a wine opener and wanted to borrow mine. I told her I have one, but it's the weird wall mounted one that my dad made. It's like a weird box with multiple inserts for opening things. In this case the wine opening one is this small electric one that will drill into the cork and you can just pull it out. So I take the bottle and turn around and walk to the kitchen, and as I'm walking I hear the sound of a pocket knife. You know, that classic whip sound. So I whip around and look at her. We stared each other down for what felt like forever, and then she started moving towards me and talking crap about how I got her boo arrested and now she has to take care of 3 kids alone and how hard it is pushing dope without her boyfriend around. Eventually, I snapped out of my Dirk and no hurt laddie mindset because I realized it was her or me, and I chose me. So I took a step back, grabbed the wine bottle by the neck, and whacked her upside the head. She crumbled to the floor and blood started to pool around her. Cops were called and an ambulance came. I was carted off to the good old county jail because it was a small town and they couldn't prove my side of the story, but they did believe it. I told my boss what happened and he paid my bail. I went back to work and started taking double shifts so I could pay back the total bro move my boss did. The boss got me in contact with a good lawyer and I was found not guilty on the grounds of self-defense. Neighbor had a camera near his door that could see inside of my house if my door was open and it caught everything. It wasn't the greatest quality, but there was no mistaking what happened. TLDR. I almost got ganked because pizza. Good on you knocking her upside the head. My buddy K wasn't as smart. Let some Rondo bar chick stab him twice without trying to defend himself. A drug dealer attacked me with a crowbar in his house because I objected to him throwing his cat off the wall. He jumped on me, bit me, then ran out of the room. He returned moments later with a crowbar. I ran out of the house with no shoes, didn't have time to put them back on. I ran down the street. It's about a mile long, no houses. It runs in the middle of a field with an old monastery on it. He gave chase with a freaking knife. I was so unfit at the time, it was horrific. No one would stop their cars and help. Understandably, I ran into the field to try and hide because I couldn't run anymore. I was stumbling down a little ankle-deep stream with no shoes on. I couldn't breathe and all I could hear was him closing in on me. The sound of the stream, my own breath and closing footsteps behind me, in the middle of nowhere. I thought if I don't get back on that road right now, I am going to die here. I turned and made a run for the road. I got there and kept running. I couldn't breathe. It was just adrenaline. I ended up bursting through the door of a rough as frick awful little pub. The barmaid let me use the phone. I'd left my mobile in dealer's house. Everyone in the bar thought it was hilarious. The dealer burst in after me and told everyone I had just smoked weed for the first ever time and was freaking out and that he'd take me home and make sure I was okay. Some people realized what was really happening at this point and told him to frick off. My dad came and picked me up. This was the start of me turning my life around. This happened 11 years ago. Good job for sticking up for the cat. My ex-boyfriend suffocated me until the point I passed out and almost succeeded in killing me. He had gotten angry at me during an argument, and when I tried to call the police because he was getting violent, he took my phone from me and forced my head face down into a pillow while he was screaming that he would kill me before he would let himself get arrested. Somewhere about 3-4 minutes in, I started to lose consciousness and thought that I was going to die. After 3 hours of him holding me captive, I managed to convince him to let me use my computer, since you can't dial 911 from a PC, and managed to Facebook message a friend who called the police for me. Thank the fricking gods your ex was an idiot. I got attacked in New Zealand, my home, by 3 kids under 17. They were gang affiliates of one of the big Maori gangs and I guess looking to earn their stripes. One was just throwing punches, one had a flathead screwdriver and was trying to stab me with it, and one had a small wood hatchet. Long story short, got a scrape in my side from the screwdriver and managed to throw myself sideways as the hatchet was swung into my head. It glanced off my temple, smashed my glasses to pieces leaving me practically blind, and I managed to run. They were all caught and because of their age were treated like the victims. They were all charged with common assault and had to pay restitution for my spectacles, which I never received. I was pretty incredulous at the time. I said to the police that if I hit someone in the head with an axe I would be charged with attempted murder. They just shrugged. Their age mate never get a conviction. I followed up 10 years later and one was dead from a car accident while and the other 2 had done time in prison for violent assaults and 1 rape. If the authorities had taken your assault seriously, those other victims might never have been hurt. In college, I woke up to someone on top of me in my apartment. I lived alone. The guy had his pants off and a knife pointed directly to my head. The memories of that night aren't really clear. He threatened to kill me multiple times. I remember crying. All I know is that at one point, he pulled the knife back as to prepare to stab me. Instinct kicked in and I grabbed it. I don't know if I scared him off because my hand was bleeding extremely bad, severed tendons and muscles on 3/5 fingers, or what, but I didn't ever really accept that I was going to die. I knew it was an option, not one I was choosing if I had any say in it. The guy ended up helping me get paper towels to wrap my hand up, demanded money, and left. Later found out he hung himself. He left a suicide note that he hung himself because the girl fought back. All I have to say about that incident is that PTSD sucks. Big time. That's so horrible and I'm sorry that happened to you. When I was 9 years old, my mother's boyfriend at the time tried to suffocate me in a container of ice cream. He was a piece of crap that had already been beating on my mom and I for a couple years. She was working and I was told I could have 2 scoops after dinner. I took 3 scoops, cause I was 9 and liked ice cream. And when he noticed, he completely lost his dang mind, screaming and throwing things around. He grabbed the ice cream from the fridge, dragged me by my hair to the bathroom and proceeded to scream at me about following the rules and this is why you are such a fat butt while holding my head down in the ice cream tub until I eventually passed out. It was only a day or so after that when he decided to hang up on my father when he called to talk to me. This resulted in my father, my uncle and 2 police officers showing up, and me moving in with my father, who was only verbally abusive instead of physical and verbal. I'm sorry. I was 14 and with a few friends, A, J and M, when we decided to buy some marijuana from a kid a couple years older than us we knew from school, X. We went to his house, made the deal and went to Jay's house. Some time later, about an hour or so, there is pounding on the door and Jay looks through the peephole. Yo, it's X. I come to answer the door with Jay and the second the lock was undone, the door flies open. Jay took the entire force of the door and got crushed between it and the wall. Several older guys rush in and I am pulled out, slammed on the ground and there's a hand around my throat. As the life is being choked out of me, I gather the choker is X's older brother. X had something stolen from him and we are held responsible. Everything was happening so fast and the blood wasn't getting to my brain so I can't recall everything clear, but I remember the last 10 seconds. Friend A was tending to Jay, who ended up with 5 broken ribs, a broken wrist, broken jaw and a dislocated knee, while M ran and got Jay's father's hunting rifle. X's brother looks at M holding this gun in the doorway of the house and says, "You freaking P. You won't shoot. You'll just watch as I kill this kid." When he looked back down at me, I saw pure psychotic rage in his eyes. Then he screamed and fell off me. Did M shoot? No, but he's beside me now waving the gun and everyone backed off except X's brother, who is screaming and holding face and there's blood all over me and him. Then I notice my hand is burning bad. Apparently, I grabbed my keys out of my pocket and holding them in my fist like some kind of claw, I slammed them into his face. My hand hurts because the keys tore my hand up, but all this blood isn't mine. The entourage of X grabs the brother and they retreat quickly, speeding off in their vehicles. Jay and I visit the hospital. He stays for 5 days as they treat his various injuries and I escaped with a small scar on my left index finger from a few stitches. X's brother was also there and my family got his injury report directly from his mother. 3 lacerations and a broken cheek that require reconstructive surgery. Lost most vision in his right eye. Perforated eardrum. 6 shattered teeth and a cracked jaw. The key to my first car had a 6mm piece of the tip break off and lodge into his jawbone. This happened 18 years ago, was even at another person's house, and I still keep a weapon by the triple locked, reinforced door for when I answer it. The sound of hard knocking can trigger anxiety attacks sometimes. All in all, I escaped alive and with a minor physical injury, but I still live with the trauma inflicted that day. My husband was held up at gunpoint in broad daylight in a very touristy area while I was on the phone with him. The kid was trying to steal his iPhone. My husband said his instincts took over and he just started running around the guy in circles while shouting to draw attention. He didn't turn and run as he'd have been an easy target. The kid finally got confused and ran off. At the end of an 8-month program in a film school, one of my best friends and me decided to do acid the last night to celebrate, but my friend insisted on doing 4 stamps each, and he paid for everything. We had done a fair amount before this together, so it was not totally abnormal, but still a bit much. 3 hours into it, he starts to block all the exits and I realize he is acting manic. But I'm on a fuckload of acid too and seem to be drifting in and out of consciousness as this guy starts to talk about the view from his 18th floor and takes me to the window. I zone in when I'm almost out the window and realize he has been trying to convince me to jump and was now resorting to physical pressure. I panicked and was in total fear since I could see the crazy in this guy's eyes. Grabbed my things and rushed out of there in the acid haze. As far as whether I accepted death, nope. The moment I was lucid enough to understand what was happening, I got the fuck out. There was a kid in high school woodshop who, though it would be cool to see someone get fricked up by the table saw, he would regularly wait for people to use it, then come up behind them with an air compressor hose and blast it in their ear or on the back of their head while the saw was being used. Obviously everyone flinches. Plenty of people would duck away from it and almost hit the blade with their face or flinch and almost run their hand or arm through the saw. We had told the teacher a few times, but he never believed anyone was that malicious. This went on for weeks. Eventually he stopped using the air compressor and just started pushing people. And then I was that person. The kid waited out of the room until I turned it on and started running a large piece of plywood through the table saw, then came over and pushed my head down. My face actually got close enough to the blade that it scraped my goggles. The blade wasn't set high enough that I would have died. I would have lost my eye and had some pretty awful damage though. I don't really remember getting that close to the bleed. It happened so fast that by the time I figured out what was going on it was over. The teacher saw it, I guess, and the kid was removed from the class, but that was it. When I was around 7, there was an older neighbor boy that my father insisted I be friends with as his dad and mine would do drugs together. The kid was touching me and I wanted it to stop as it had been going on for around a year and was escalating in a way that even a very sheltered child could recognize as very bad, and I'd seen enough violence that I could all but smell what he was going to do. I threatened to tell, and while it's very fuzzy here, I think he started to suffocate me, but my dad started calling for me when this was going on and he let up but threatened to kill my mother if I ever told. And as my father had tried to strangle my mom to death in front of me before, I believed this boy when he said it. That's horrible. I'm sorry you had to go through that. I don't know what she was trying to do or when she would have stopped, but my mother-in-law snapped and jumped me one day. She'd called to ask if I'd go get her prescription, 20 minutes from my house, and bring it to her, 30 minutes back the other way. I was low on funds and had my nephew we'd taken in to provide for, so I made sure she said she'd have the money to give back to me for the script and a few dollars in gas. When I got there, she was all crazy looking. Not unusual, but off enough for me to notice it was worse than normal, and I handed her the script and asked for the money. She didn't answer and pushed past me to go to the car, where my baby nephew was sleeping. I came up behind her and asked what was wrong, and she said, "My grandson's not going anywhere with you, you little s." I said, "Whatever, Kathy, you obviously just don't have the money and now you're trying to turn it around like I did something wrong. This after I drive all over and deliver your meds to you, but fine." I had gotten into the front seat and buckled up, but the car was running. I'd never turned it off. She grabbed my ponytail from behind and started punching the back of my head. It took time to get the car in park and get out of the seatbelt, but when I did, we brawled. She's also a huge woman. Very tall. IDK if she clears 6 feet, but she's close. Maybe 280 pounds. I was 5 feet 2 inches and 120. She got on top and tried to choke, and I grabbed a fistful of hair, snatched her head down and held it while I punched with the other. I think it was then that I broke my wrist, but I didn't know it then. Finally, my nephew's mom, Kathy's daughter, comes out and screams, and she finally gets off. But the whole time it was like the lights were on but no one was home in her eyes. She may very well have kept going if no one had been around to snap her out of it, and while she, the cops and everyone else would say I gave as good as I got the worst of it, and she attacked me. She got up and went in the house, and I went to the car and tried to get the baby. When I went to undo the straps, I realized my wrist was injured. Someone had called the cops. I won't get into all that, but I ended up having to have surgery for pins and screws in my wrist and it still hurts regularly. I haven't laid eyes on her since court and never will again. My husband was humiliated and just devastated. Every time I cried, he cried harder. His stepmom told me that before his grandmother, she told her that when my husband was a baby she walked in on Kathy trying to smother him. B is certified crazy and should be locked TF up. I was in an abusive relationship when I was 19 and 20. My abuser tried to kill me a few times. The last time he attempted to throw me down the stairs and I fought back, so he stomped on my face. It was my 20th birthday. He stomped on my face and arms and kicked my body. I don't know what made him stop, but I remember thinking this is how I die. I remember thinking that and jolting back to reality, forcing myself to stay awake and not pass out. I remember running out of the house with my phone and my laptop and my wallet. I remember my uncle pulling up and taking me to the hospital. I survived with a broken orbital bone and some pretty bad trauma. There were days he'd wave a gun in my face, but it wasn't as bad as that night. I don't know how I survived. I don't know how I got out. I don't know how I was brave enough to leave him, but I did. I turned 21 last week, and I survived, and I'm thriving. My ex-girlfriend hit me in the head with a clothes iron, giving me 13 stitches. She wasn't charged with attempted murder, but after she hit me I turned around and she was swinging the fricking thing over her head by the cord. I think an argument could have been made for attempted murder. Dang, what led to the fight? Probably will get buried, but I'm fairly certain someone on a dark rural road was trying to pull me over and kill me. I was driving back from New Orleans to Mobile, Alabama around 10 p.m. Just empty roads for miles, pitch black. Then this black car comes up behind me, passes me going really fast. No big deal. But then the car starts to slow down. Okay, this guy is a crappy driver. I speed up to go around him. Maybe he got a text or something. But when I try to pass him, he gets in front of me again and slows down even more. Then I try to pass on the other lane. Again, the car slows down even more and gets in front of me. I can't pass, and at this point and we are both going like 10 miles per hour. 5 mph. Then dead fricking stop. Middle of the highway. Pitch black. Long, straight stretch of road. No street lamps. Nothing but fricking swamp and river around. Bumblefuck nowhere. The door starts to open. I wait a moment, then scream around the car, dipping in the grass on the side of the road, hoping I don't hit debris that gives me a flat tire or something. This sucker closes the door and starts speeding after me. I check my phone and this is back in like 2008, where I wasn't cool enough to have a kick-ass smartphone. I just had a typical flip phone with AT&T and I had no bars. It was like a bad horror movie trope. This car manages to pass me again and starts slowing down again. The car got me to a dead fricking stop about 3 times, and 3 times I managed to speed around. This cat and mouse crap went on for a good 25 to 30 minutes. Finally, we started to come up on some aspects of civilization. The road widened up, some streetlights appeared, an intersection crept up and this guy dropped back, took an exit, and I didn't see him again. The car was black. The windows were tinted. I have never been more scared and freaked out in my life. Bought a gun after that. Got training. Never leaves my fricking side. All I could think was, if this guy manages to get out of that car, I have nothing to defend myself with. This happened to my cousin. The police who responded when she called told her that even when she doesn't have a weapon, her car is a weapon. I know it's hard to realize in your panic, but you could have effectively run him over. I was abused, molested, and tortured by an ex. It was early summer 2011 and me being the naive kid I was, decided to shack up with an older guy because he could clothe and feed me in exchange for sex and chores around the house. Things went well for the first few weeks before he started getting physically abusive. Well, one night he decides to host a party and he blindfolds and cuffs my hands together. At this point I thought I'd just wind up displayed for a while till the party ended. I was wrong. He bound my cuffs to a pipe in a walk-in style shower he had. It was a disability bar. I spent 13 days bound in that shower, being used and beaten by him and no telling how many other men on a daily basis. I escaped though. I broke the thumb of my left hand and pulled it out of the shackle while he was at work. Still doesn't work quite right. I still have back spasms and a fear of showering with others all these years later. What the frick? I'm glad you made it out. I'm so sorry. I had a roommate's girlfriend try to kill me once. She came into my room one night while I was very drunk and very depressed and tried to convince me I wanted to kill myself. When that didn't work, she pinned me down, put a box cutter in my hand, wrapped her hand around mine, and dragged it down my arm. She did the same with my other arm, then ran out into the living room screaming that I'd tried to kill myself. Lost all my friends that night. They thought I was selfish for trying to kill myself. That night probably ended up saving my life, as it was the first step in learning to get rid of toxic people. Dude, that's insane. She tried to make you commit suicide and her acts only made you not do so. Go you. Hope you're feeling a lot better. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.